In the freshwater lakes of the Fiji, Solomon and Vanuatu Islands lives a mighty creature called the Abaia. This giant eel watches over all the fish in its lake like a parent guards its children. The Abaia uses its powerful tail to create huge waves that push away anyone who tries to catch the fish it protects. The Abaia looks like an ordinary eel, but it grows to an amazing size that dwarfs all other lake creatures. Its long body stretches through the deepest parts of the lake where light barely reaches. The eel's strong tail can move so much water that it creates waves as tall as trees. A famous story tells of a man who found a lake full of fish and brought his whole village to catch them. One woman even grabbed the giant eel itself, though it slipped away from her grasp. That night, the angry Abaia sent heavy rains that caused the lake to flood, drowning everyone except one old woman who had not eaten any fish. The Abaia changed how island people treated their lakes and streams. Villages learned to fish with care and respect, taking only what they needed. People began to see lakes as more than just places to find food. They became sacred spaces watched over by a powerful guardian who demanded respect for all water creatures. The Ahuizotl lived in the lakes and rivers of ancient Mexico. This water monster had a special power. It could make its tail look like a small human hand to trick people into coming close to the water. People feared the Ahuizotl because it pulled swimmers and fishermen under the water, never to be seen again. The creature looked like a mix between a dog and an otter, with dark wet fur and short legs. Its most strange feature was its monkey-like tail that ended in a hand with sharp claws. The beast had big eyes that glowed yellow in the dark, and its teeth were as sharp as knives. The most famous story of the Ahuizotl tells of a young fisher who saw what looked like a child's hand reaching from the water. When he tried to help the child, the hand grabbed him and pulled him deep into the lake. The villagers heard his screams but found only his empty boat floating on the water. The Ahuizotl changed how people lived near water. Parents warned their children never to go near lakes or rivers alone. Fishermen always worked in groups and made special prayers before going out in their boats. Some villages built high fences along dangerous parts of the water to protect their people from the creature's tricks. In the cold waters of Hokkaido, Japan, the Akkorokamui rules as a mighty sea spirit with powers of healing and destruction. This massive octopus-like being dwells in Uchiura Bay, where local people both fear and respect its ability to cure illnesses, and break boats with its powerful tentacles. The creature draws both Ainu and Japanese people to its waters, seeking its blessing for health and safety at sea. The Akkorokamui stretches longer than 3 football fields, with a bright red body that glows in the dark waters. Its 8 giant arms move like underwater trees in the wind, each strong enough to lift a fishing boat. When it rises from the depths, sailors say the water turns red as coral, and its eyes shine like 2 full moons. Before becoming a sea spirit, the Akkorokamui lived as a giant spider named Yaoshikep in the mountains. When it attacked a small village, the people prayed to the sea god for help. The sea god dragged the spider into the ocean, where it changed into the red octopus spirit that protects and punishes people today. The Akkorokamui's greatest gift lies in its power to heal broken bodies and sick minds. People who live near its bay bring offerings of fresh fish and crabs, hoping the spirit will cure their injuries. Like an octopus that can regrow its arms, the Akkorokamui teaches those who honor it how to heal and become whole again. Ancient Persia, the demon Apaosha brought fear to farmers and families as the dreaded spirit of drought. This dark horse-shaped being fought against Tishraya, the star spirit of rain, in an endless battle for control of water. People watched the summer skies and prayed that Apaosha would lose his fight to keep the rains away. Apaosha appears as a massive black horse with ears and tail dark as night. His hooves strike sparks from the clouds when he gallops, and his eyes burn with the heat of summer. Next to the bright white form of Tishraya, Apaosha looks like a storm cloud blocking out the stars. The greatest battle between Apaosha and Tishraya lasted 3 days and nights above the mighty sea called Vurukasha. At first, Apaosha pushed back the rain spirit, but then the great god Ahura Mazda gave Tishraya special powers. With new strength, Tishraya struck Apaosha down at noon, and life-giving rains poured from the sky. Farmers and herders watched for signs of this battle each summer, when the star Sirius rose in the dawn sky. They believed Apaosha fought hardest during the hottest days, trying to stop the autumn rains. People made special prayers and offerings to Teshtraya, hoping to weaken Apaosha's power over the dry earth. In the vast seas of ancient times, the Aspidochelone tricked sailors with its most fearsome power, the ability to look exactly like an island. This massive creature drew tired crews to rest on what seemed like a safe shore, only to drag them into the depths when they least expected it. Ships and sailors alike feared this beast that turned a welcome sight into a deadly trap. From a distance, the Aspidocchelone's back rose from the waves like a small hill covered in sand and plants. Birds would land on its broad shell, and sometimes trees even grew there. When it floated near the surface, its dark shape under the water stretched longer than the biggest sailing ship. One famous tale tells of sailors who thought they found a perfect place to stop for the night. They dropped their anchors and built fires on what seemed to be sandy ground. As the warmth reached through the Aspidocchelone's thick skin, it dove beneath the waves without warning, taking the whole crew down into the cold sea. Sailors began to watch carefully for signs that an island might be more than it seemed. They learned to look for unusual movements in the water, or sudden changes in the sea floor. Those who lived to tell about the Aspidochelone warned others never to trust an island that appeared where no island should be. People across many lands told stories about this creature, giving it different names like Jasconius, Fastatokalon, or Zaratan. Holy men used these tales to teach about the danger of being fooled by nice-looking things, comparing the beast to evil spirits that hide their true nature. In ancient Arabia, a giant fish called Bahamut lived in the deepest part of all waters, far below where any human could ever swim. This mighty creature had one vital task. It formed the very bottom layer that held up the entire world. Without Bahamut staying perfectly still in its watery home, ancient Arabic people believed the earth itself might fall into darkness. To understand Bahamut's size, imagine all the oceans in the world fitting inside just one of its nostrils like a tiny seed in a vast desert. On its enormous back stood a great bull, and above the bull rested a glowing red gemstone as big as a mountain. An angel stood on top of this gemstone, using its strong shoulders to hold up the earth where all people lived. The most famous tale of Bahamut tells of a time when an evil spirit named Iblis tried to cause trouble. Iblis whispered to Bahamut, trying to convince the great fish to move and shake the world. But God protected the earth by sending small flying bugs to distract Bahamut, making the giant fish forget all about causing earthquakes. Sailors and people living near the sea watched the tides rise and fall each day, believing these changes came from Bahamut and the bull drinking water that flowed down from the earth. They thought both creatures helped keep the seas from flooding the land, but they also worried that one day, when Bahamut and the bull had drunk too much, their restless movements would mark the end of the world. Off the stormy coasts of western Japan, sailors once feared the sight of the Bake-kujira, a ghostly whale that appeared as nothing but bones gliding through the dark waters. This supernatural creature swam through the waves as both a warning and a curse to those who hunted whales. Villages that spotted the Bake-kujira often faced terrible luck, sickness, and fire. Unlike normal whales with smooth skin and blubber, the Bake-kujira looked like a massive whale skeleton that glowed with an eerie light in the water. Strange birds circled above it, while mysterious fish swam beside it, making the creature even more frightening to those who saw it. No flesh covered its bones, yet it moved through the sea as if it were alive. When the Bake-kujira appeared near fishing villages, it brought doom to those who had killed whales or eaten their meat. The ghost whale did not attack ships directly, but instead cursed entire communities. Its power reached beyond the waves and into the homes of whale hunters. The fear of the Bake-kujira changed how many Japanese fishing villages thought about whaling. People believed that killing whales would anger this spirit of the sea, bringing bad fortune to their homes and families. Some villages chose to stop hunting whales completely, worried that the bone whale might appear to punish them. Among the islands of the Philippines, the Bakunawa rose from the sea as a mighty dragon with the power to swallow the moon. Ancient people watched the night sky in fear when this great serpent appeared, believing it caused not just the dark times we now call eclipses, but also earthquakes, storms, and mighty winds. Both kings and common folk feared and respected this creature that could steal the light from their world. The Bakunawa's body coiled through the sky like a giant snake, its scales gleaming in the starlight. A single sharp horn grew from its nose, and its tail formed a perfect loop behind its body. Some said it could stretch so long it wrapped around the entire world, while others claimed it could shrink small enough to hide in the deep ocean caves. Long ago, when 7 moons lit up the night sky, the Bakunawa fell in love with their beauty. One by one, it rose from the sea and swallowed 6 of these moons whole. Before it could eat the last moon, the great god Bathala planted bamboo trees on its surface to protect it, making the dark spots we see on the moon today. People across the islands learned to fight back against the Bakunawa whenever it came for the last moon. They would run outside with pots and pans, beating them to make loud noises that forced the dragon to spit the moon back into the sky. Others played sweet music to put the beast to sleep, hoping to keep their precious moon safe in the darkness. Even today, Filipino parents teach their children games about the moon and the Bakunawa. In these games, one child plays the dragon while another acts as the moon, helping young ones remember how their ancestors protected the night sky. Warriors decorated their swords with the Bakunawa's image, believing it gave them the dragon's strength and power in battle. In the waterways of Assam, India, the Baak hunts as a deadly shapeshifter who can take the form of anyone it kills. This tall, thin spirit targets fishermen near lakes and rivers, stealing their catch and sometimes their lives. People fear the Baak most for its power to replace their loved ones, living among families while planning to kill them one by one. The Baak towers over normal people with legs and arms like bamboo stalks, and skin stretched tight over its bones. Almost hairless, its true form moves like a shadow near the water's edge. When it takes a dead person's shape, only the smallest details might show something is wrong, like a strange new habit or an odd look in the eyes. A famous story tells of a Baak who killed a husband working at his fishing nets, then went home wearing the man's face. It fooled everyone but the wife, who noticed small changes in her husband's behavior. She discovered the truth when she found it eating raw fish in the dark, but barely escaped with her life. Villages across Assam created rules to protect themselves from the Baak. No one answers calls from outside after dark, since the spirit can copy any voice it hears. Fishermen carry torn nets because the Baak fears broken things. Some say a Baak keeps its power in a special bag, and anyone who takes this bag can control the spirit. The Boto lived in the rivers of the Amazon rainforest, where it held a magical power to change from a pink river dolphin into a handsome young man. People both feared and respected this creature because it could charm young women at village dances, only to return to the river at dawn and leave them heartbroken or with child. The Boto, in its natural form, swam as a large pink dolphin with a long curved beak and gentle eyes. When it changed into human shape, it became a tall man wearing white clothes and a hat, which it never removed because it had to hide the blowhole on top of its head. The creature always kept a graceful way of moving, as if dancing through water even on land. The most famous story tells of a beautiful young woman who fell in love with a mysterious stranger at a festival. They danced all night, but as the sun began to rise, the man rushed away toward the river. The woman followed him just in time to see him dive into the water and change back into a pink dolphin, swimming away into the deep parts of the Amazon. The Boto shaped how people lived along the Amazon rivers. Young women avoided walking alone near the water during full moons when the Boto was said to come ashore. Parents used these stories to warn their daughters about trusting strangers, and some communities banned single men from their festivals if no one knew which village they came from. The Bunyip lived in the waters of Australia, hiding in swamps, creeks, and deep pools where the water turned dark. This fearsome creature could make sounds like a booming drum or a crying baby to lure people close to the water's edge. The Aboriginal people feared and respected the Bunyip because it punished those who took too many fish or let their children play too near the dangerous waters. The Bunyip could look different in each telling, but most often appeared as a large beast with dark fur and a round head like a dog. Some said it had fins for swimming fast, while others described it with a long neck like an emu and small tusks that gleamed in the moonlight. The creature stood as tall as 2 men when it rose from the water, with eyes that glowed yellow in the dark. One famous story tells of a group of fishermen who caught more fish than they needed from a deep pool. As night fell, they heard a low boom echo across the water, growing louder and closer. The Bunyip rose from the pool, its huge form blocking out the stars. The men ran away, leaving their catch behind, and never again took more fish than they could eat. The Bunyip shaped how Aboriginal people lived near water. Parents taught their children to listen for the creature's call and stay away from unknown pools and swamps. Fishermen made special signs of respect before fishing and never took more than they needed. Some communities marked certain waters as Bunyip homes, creating safe boundaries that helped protect both people and the fishing grounds for future years. The Cai Cai-Vilu lived beneath the waters off the coast of Chile, where it took the form of a mighty sea snake with power over all ocean creatures. This god of the sea could raise or lower the waters at will, controlling the tides and waves. The Mapuche people both feared and honored Cai Cai-Vilu because it could flood their lands or bless them with good fishing. The creature looked like an enormous snake that could stretch from the ocean floor to the sky. Its scales shone with all the colors of the sea, from deep blue to bright green. When Cai Cai-Vilu moved through the waters, its body created waves that could sink boats or gently rock them to shore. The most famous story tells how Cai Cai-Vilu fought with Ten-Ten-Vilu, the snake spirit of the land and mountains. When Ten-Ten-Vilu raised the land to protect people from floods, Cai Cai-Vilu made the waters rise higher and higher. Their battle created the islands and channels of Chile as pieces of land rose above the waves, while others sank beneath them. The people living along the coast shaped their lives around Cai Cai-Vilu's moods. Fishermen watched the tides carefully and made offerings to the sea god before sailing. Families built their homes on high ground and taught their children the signs of Cai Cai-Vilu's anger, like sudden changes in the tide or unusual waves. The sea goat roamed both the ocean depths and mountain peaks of ancient Babylon, able to swim through water or climb rocky heights with equal skill. This magical creature could change from a goat to a fish at will, moving freely between land and sea. Ancient people respected the sea goat because it showed how to adapt and thrive in any place or situation. The creature had the head and front legs of a mountain goat, with curved horns and a shaggy beard. From its middle to its tail, it had the gleaming scales and fins of a fish, which sparkled like stars in the water. Its eyes glowed with wisdom gained from traveling between 2 worlds. According to stories, the sea goat began as a god who jumped into a river to escape a terrible monster. In his rush to hide, he only managed to turn his lower half into a fish, creating his unique form. Later, he helped heal an injured king, and as a reward, the king placed his image among the stars as the constellation Capricorn. People looked to the sea goat as a guide for living between different worlds. Sailors carved its image on their ships to help them move safely between land and sea. Traders who traveled between cities in valleys and mountain towns wore sea goat charms for protection. Even today, the sea goat marks the time of year when winter begins to turn toward spring, showing how it still connects different parts of life. The carbuncle lived in the mountains and jungles of South America, from Chile to Paraguay. This mysterious creature carried a bright red jewel on its head that glowed like burning coal in the darkness. People hunted the carbuncle because they believed anyone who caught it would become rich beyond measure. No one ever saw the carbuncle clearly enough to know if it was a bird or an animal, if it had fur or feathers. Some said it looked like a small dog with a shining light under its chin, while others claimed it was the size of a mouse with a hard shell like a clam. The one thing all stories agreed on was the creature's brilliant red light, which could be seen from miles away on dark nights. During the Great Drought of 1924, a family in Chile spotted several carbuncles coming down from Tulahuan Mountain. The creatures moved like fireflies through the darkness, their red lights bobbing up and down as they descended toward the Rio Grande River. When people tried to get closer, the carbuncles would sense them coming and quickly hide their light, vanishing into the night. The people of Chile created special rules for catching a carbuncle and finding its treasure. They said a hunter must throw a piece of string or a belt toward the creature, which would grab it and run away. The next morning, just before dawn, the hunter would find the string's end sticking out of the ground near a thorny bush, marking the spot where treasure lay buried. Only those who followed the exact rules could get the carbuncle's gold. Hunters had to dig at midnight with a new shovel, bringing along an old widow and her black cat. For each yard they dug deeper, they had to throw the cat into the hole. The cat would vanish but then appear again in the widow's arms. If hunters showed any fear or failed to follow these steps, the treasure would turn to stone. Or worse, the digger would die in the pit from breathing bad air. The Ceffyl Dŵr haunted the waters of Wales, appearing near mountain pools, waterfalls, and seashores as a beautiful horse that anyone could ride. This water spirit could travel faster than any normal horse, and even fly through the air with its rider. People feared the Ceffyl Dŵr because it would carry riders far from home before turning to mist, dropping them to their death or dragging them through rough land until they barely looked human. The creature most often appeared as a gray or black horse with a flowing white mane that sometimes gave off a soft light. Its hooves pointed backward instead of forward, which gave away its magical nature to those who knew what to look for. During storms, its coat would change to gleaming silver, and some said it could grow wings when it wanted to fly. One famous tale tells of a tired traveler who met the Ceffyl Dŵr near a waterfall. The horse carried him at the speed of lightning from the village of Glinneath to Llandewi Brefi, a journey that should have taken many days, in just 1 hour. When the horse vanished into thin air, the man found himself alone in a strange place, but alive, which made him luckier than most who rode the water horse. The Welsh people learned to be careful around any lone horse they found near water, especially at night. However, they believed holy men like priests could safely ride the Ceffyl Dŵr as long as they stayed quiet during the journey. Farmers sometimes tried to catch and use the water horse for work, but this always ended badly. The creature would break free and pull its captor into the sea or a deep pool. The Cetus lived in the ancient seas of Greek mythology, where it ruled as the most feared sea monster of its time. This massive beast had the power to destroy entire ships and terrorize coastal towns. The ancient Greeks believed the god Poseidon sent these creatures to punish those who angered him. The Cetus looked like several fearsome animals combined into one terrifying beast. It had either the head of a giant wild boar or a hunting dog, attached to a whale-like body bigger than any ship. Its tail split into fan shapes, and its spine was thicker than a person's height. Some people who saw it said just its skull was as long as 40 feet. The most famous story of the Cetus tells of its battle with the hero Perseus. When Queen Cassiopeia claimed she was more beautiful than the sea spirits called Nereids, Poseidon sent a Cetus to attack her kingdom. The king had to chain his daughter Andromeda to a rock as a sacrifice to the monster. Perseus found her and killed the Cetus, either with a magical sword or by turning it to stone with Medusa's head. The Cetus shaped how ancient people thought about the sea and its dangers. Sailors watched for these monsters and saw them as signs of coming storms or bad luck. Some cultures, like the Etruscans, believed these creatures helped carry souls to the afterlife. The word Cetus later gave us cetacean, which we now use for whales and dolphins. The most dreaded monster of ancient seas lived in a narrow channel between Italy and Sicily. Charybdis created giant whirlpools that could swallow entire ships. Greek sailors feared this beast above all others because she made the waters spin 3 times each day, leaving no safe time to pass through her strait. Charybdis looked nothing like other sea monsters of myth. Instead of having teeth or claws, she was like a living whirlpool with a huge mouth that reached down to the bottom of the sea. When she drank, she pulled the ocean waters down into a spinning funnel that could trap the largest ships. The great hero Odysseus faced Charybdis on his journey home from war. He chose to sail closer to another monster, Scylla, to avoid Charybdis completely. But fate brought him back alone on a tiny raft. When Charybdis swallowed his raft, Odysseus grabbed a fig tree hanging over her whirlpool. He waited until she spit his raft back out, then jumped onto it and paddled to safety. The legend of Charybdis taught sailors important lessons about nature's power. Her story warned them that sometimes they must choose between 2 dangers and pick the one they might survive. Even today, people use the phrase, "between Scylla and Charybdis," to describe having to choose between two awful options. In the ancient waters before the world began, the Aztec monster Cipactli swam through endless seas. This fearsome creature had an endless hunger and could eat anything it found. The Aztecs feared and respected Cipactli because their entire world was made from its body. Cipactli combined parts from many different animals into one terrifying beast. It had the front of a crocodile, the middle of a fish, and the back legs of a toad. Every joint on its body had an extra mouth, always open and ready to feed. The monster never stopped eating, no matter how much it consumed. The great gods Tezcatlipoca and Quetzalcoatl knew they had to stop Cipactli to create the world. Tezcatlipoca used his own foot as bait to lure the monster close. When Cipactli bit off his foot, both gods attacked the creature. They split its body in two, using the top half to make the sky and the bottom half to create the earth. The Aztecs saw reminders of Cipactli in their daily lives. The rough surface of the earth reminded them of the monster's scaly skin. They believed earthquakes happened when Cipactli moved its many mouths, still hungry after all this time. Even their calendar began with Cipactli's sign, showing how this monster marked the beginning of everything. The devil whale's back stretched wider than the biggest ships of the time, covered in what looked like beach sand and growing plants. Like a giant sperm whale but many times larger, its mouth could swallow entire ships in one bite. When it floated still in the water, waves lapped at its sides just like they would against a real island's shore. The devil whale's back stretched wider than the biggest ships of the time, covered in what looked like beach sand and growing plants. Like a giant sperm whale but many times larger, its mouth could swallow entire ships in one bite. When it floated still in the water, waves lapped at its sides just like they would against a real island's shore. The most famous story tells of a group of monks led by St. Brendan, who landed on what they thought was an island during Easter. They set up camp and lit a fire to cook their meal, not knowing they stood on the devil whale's back. As soon as the whale felt the heat of their fire, it dove deep into the sea, forcing the monks to run for their boats. Sailors changed their habits at sea because of the devil whale. They learned to watch closely for signs that an island might actually be alive, like water that looked too deep near the shore or ground that felt too warm. Ship captains warned their crews never to light fires right away when landing on small, unknown islands. The Dobhar-chú stalked the lakes and rivers of ancient Ireland, hunting with the skill of both otter and wolf combined. This massive waterhound could swim faster than any fish and run as swift as any land creature. The Irish people feared this beast because it attacked without warning and always hunted with a mate nearby. Looking like a giant otter with special markings, the Dobhar-chú stood out from normal river creatures. It grew to be 5 times larger than any otter, with pure white fur, black-tipped ears, and a dark cross mark on its back. Its thick fur could shed water instantly, letting it move easily between water and land. In the year 1722, the Dobhar-chú killed a woman named Grace McGloylan while she washed clothes by Glenade Lake. Her husband found the beast sleeping on her body and killed it with his dagger. The dying creature made a whistling sound to call its mate, which rose from the lake to chase the husband. After a long fight, he managed to kill the second beast too. The story of the Dobhar-chú lives on in Irish culture through a special grave marker. In Conwall Cemetery, Grace McGloylan's headstone shows a carved picture of the waterhound that killed her. People still visit this stone today, proving how this creature's legend continues to touch people's lives. The Dragon Kings ruled over all the waters of ancient China, from the smallest well to the greatest ocean. These powerful gods could control the weather and bring life-giving rain to the land. Chinese people both feared and honored these beings because their choices could mean the difference between good harvests and terrible floods. Each Dragon King took the form of a mighty dragon with scales that shone in different colors based on their realm. The Eastern Dragon King glowed blue-green like spring leaves, the southern one burned red like summer heat, the western one gleamed white like autumn frost, and the northern one showed black like winter nights. At the center of all things lived the Yellow Dragon King, who balanced the powers of all seasons. The most famous Dragon King, Aoguang of the Eastern Sea, once refused to send rain to the land. A brave warrior named Neja challenged him by beating up his son and taking away his magic pearls. Aoguang gathered an army to attack Neja's home, but in the end, he had to bow before the Jade Emperor and promise to be fair with his reigns. People built temples to honor the Dragon Kings all across China, and many still stand today. On the 13th day of the 6th moon month, villages celebrated the Dragon King's birthday with large parades and offerings. Farmers would pray to them for rain during dry times, while sailors asked for safe passage across dangerous waters. These mighty beings shaped how Chinese people saw the connection between heaven and earth. Even today, dragon boat races and rain prayers keep alive the memory of these powerful gods who commanded the waters and weather of the world. The Each-uisge prowled the seas and lakes of Scotland, using its power to change shape and lure victims to their death. This water horse could appear as a beautiful riding horse, a handsome man, or even a giant bird. Scottish people feared it as the most deadly of all water spirits because it would not just kill its victims, but tear them apart, leaving only the liver floating on the water. In its most common form, the Each-uisge looked like a fine black horse standing by the water's edge. Anyone who saw it would notice its coat shining more beautifully than any normal horse. If it took human shape, only the seaweed tangled in its hair, or the mud covering its clothes gave away its true nature. One famous story tells of a blacksmith whose daughter fell victim to the Each-uisge. Mad with grief, he and his son built a trap using large iron hooks heated red hot in a fire. They placed roasted sheep meat near the water as bait. When the monster rose from the lake to eat the meat, they struck it with the burning hooks. The next morning, they found nothing but a blob of jelly where the creature had been. The Each-uisge changed how Scottish people lived their daily lives near water. Parents warned their children never to approach strange horses near lakes or the sea. Young women learned to check for seaweed in the hair of handsome strangers who appeared by the water. Even today, some Highland families still tell these stories to teach their children about the dangers that might lurk beneath calm waters. The Enbarr lived in ancient Ireland as a magical horse owned by Manannán, the god of the sea. This special horse could run as fast as the wind across both land and water, making it one of the most powerful creatures in Irish stories. People respected the Enbarr because anyone who rode on its back could not be killed, which made it a prized helper in times of war and danger. The Enbarr looked like a beautiful horse with an amazing flowing mane that shone in the sunlight. Some stories say it was white as sea foam, and its hooves barely touched the ground or water as it ran. When it moved across the waves, it seemed to float like a cloud, and on land it ran so smoothly that riders felt like they were flying. The most famous story of the Enbarr tells how the sea god Manannán let the great hero Lugh borrow it during a time of trouble. Lugh rode the magical horse to lead an army of fairy warriors against evil creatures called the Fomorians who were hurting his people. With the Enbarr's speed and protection, Lugh became a mighty leader in the battle. The Enbarr changed how people thought about the connection between land and sea. Sailors and warriors prayed to Manannán, hoping his magical horse might help them travel safely across dangerous waters. The story of the Enbarr taught people that the same powers that ruled the ocean could also bring help on land, and that the gods might lend their powerful creatures to protect humans in need. In the rushing streams and waterfalls of Norway and Sweden lived the Fossegrim, a water spirit who played the fiddle with magic that no human musician could match. His music held the power of nature itself, mixing the sounds of wind, water, and wild forests into songs so beautiful that everyone who heard them had to dance. People both feared and wanted his gift, for while he would teach humans to play, his price was always high. The Fossegrim looked like a handsome young man who lived in the falling water, especially near old water mills. He wore wet, shining clothes that sparkled like the stream, and his fingers moved faster than human eyes could follow when he played his fiddle. Some say he could make himself look like the mist that rises from a waterfall in the morning. The most famous story tells of how humans could learn his magical music. On a Thursday night, they had to throw a white goat into a north-flowing waterfall, turning their heads away as they did it. If the Fossegrim liked this gift, he would take the student's right hand and pull their fingers across the fiddle strings until they bled. After this painful lesson, the student could play so well that trees would dance and waterfalls would stop flowing to listen. This spirit changed how people thought about music in Scandinavia. Two of Norway's greatest fiddle players, Torgeir Augunsen and Ola Bull, were said to have learned from the Fossegrim. Parents warned children to be careful near waterfalls, not just because they might fall in, but because the Fossegrim's music might make them dance right into the stream. Even today, when people hear beautiful fiddle music near a waterfall, they sometimes wonder if the Fossegrim is playing. The fur-bearing trout swam in the icy rivers of North America and Iceland, where it grew a thick coat of white fur to stay warm in the freezing waters. This strange fish could only live in the coldest streams, and many believed it would burst open if caught and brought into warmer air. People told stories about these fish because they seemed to prove that nature could create amazing things to help creatures survive. Unlike normal trout with their smooth, shiny scales, the fur-bearing trout had soft white fur covering its entire body like a rabbit. Its fur grew thicker in winter and became thinner in summer, just like other furry animals that lived near the cold rivers. The fish kept its bright red and silver trout colors underneath its furry coat. One of the best-known stories comes from Salida, a town in Colorado near the Arkansas River. The town's leader, Wilbur Fauché, told everyone about these special fish that lived in the river. He said fishermen had to give the trout haircuts to catch them, pretending to be barbers and calling out free trim over the water until curious fish came close enough to catch. These stories changed how people fished in cold places. Travelers would visit northern rivers hoping to catch a furry trout, and locals made stuffed ones to sell using rabbit fur on normal fish. Some towns still keep these fake fur-bearing trout in their museums, and fishing guides joke about spotting them in the deepest, coldest pools of their rivers. The Gajamina lived in the spiritual world of ancient Bali, where it guided the souls of the dead to their final rest. This magical creature combined the wisdom of an elephant with the grace of a fish, making it a perfect guide between the worlds of land and sea. The Balinese people carved its image on special coffins called patulangan to help their loved ones reach the afterlife safely. Looking at the Gajamina, you would see the noble head of an elephant with long tusks and a curling trunk sitting atop a fish's silvery body covered in scales. Its fins spread out like flowing silk in water, and its tail moved with the power of ocean waves. Artists always showed the creature swimming upward, as if climbing an invisible river in the sky. The most important story of the Gajamina tells how it helped carry the souls of noble people, called Ksatriyas, from earth to heaven. Like a boat captain who knows all the safe paths through dangerous waters, the Gajamina used its elephant's wisdom to find the way, and its fish's strength to swim through the space between worlds. This belief changed how the Balinese prepared for death and remembered their ancestors. Families spent many days creating beautiful coffins with the Gajamina's image, believing this would protect their relatives on their final journey. Even today, people in Bali carve the Gajamina's picture on special buildings and gates to show that a place connects the everyday world with the spirit world. Near the dark ponds and marshes of Yorkshire and Lancashire in England lived the Grindylow, a water creature that pulled children under the surface with its long, strong fingers. These beings had the strength to drag even the strongest swimmer down into their murky homes. Parents both feared the Grindylow and used stories about it to keep their children away from dangerous waters. The Grindylow looked like a small person with scaly green skin that helped it hide among water plants. Its most striking features were its thin arms that could stretch out like rubber bands and end in bony fingers with sharp claws. When it opened its mouth, rows of pointed green teeth gleamed in the murky water. Stories tell of how the Grindylow would hide under lily pads and floating plants, waiting silently for children who came too close to the water's edge. It would reach up suddenly with its long arms, grab the child's legs or clothes, and pull them down into the dark water. Some say it could stretch its arms as long as tree branches to catch its victims. These tales changed how families lived near water in northern England. Parents taught their children to stay away from pond edges and marsh banks, using the Grindylow as a warning. The creature became so well known that even today, English parents might warn their children about the Grindylow when they play near water, just as their own parents once warned them. In the deep waters of ancient Georgia, the Gveleshapi lurked as a mighty creature that was both snake and whale in one form. This fearsome water spirit controlled all the rivers, lakes, and springs in the land. People feared the Gveleshapi because it caused floods and droughts, using its power over water to bring disaster to their communities. The Gveleshapi appeared as a massive serpent with features of both snake and whale combined into one terrifying beast. Its long, scaly body could stretch the length of a river, while its huge whale-like head could swallow whole boats. The creature's movements could stir up storms in lakes, or make rivers overflow their banks. One famous tale tells of a hero who fought the Gveleshapi when it blocked the main river flowing through his village. The beast had stopped all water from reaching the farms and people downstream. After a fierce battle that lasted 3 days and 3 nights, the hero struck the creature's weak spot under its throat, forcing it to release the water and return to the deep. The Gveleshapi shaped how Georgian people lived for many years. Villages posted guards near water sources to watch for signs of the beast. Farmers built special channels and pools to protect their water supply. People also left small gifts near springs and wells, hoping to keep the creature happy so it would allow the water to flow freely. The Hippocampus lived in both the seas and rivers of ancient Greece and Rome. This mighty creature held power over waves and storms, serving the great god Poseidon as his trusted steed. People who lived near water respected these beings because they could either help ships reach shore safely or create waves that could sink entire fleets. Half horse and half fish, the Hippocampus stands out among all mythical creatures. Its front half looks like a proud horse, with a flowing mane and strong hooves that can gallop across the water's surface. Where a normal horse's back legs would be, the Hippocampus has a long, fish-like tail covered in scales that shimmers in the sunlight and helps it swim through the deepest waters. The most famous story of the Hippocampus tells of how these creatures pulled Poseidon's golden chariot across the seas. As the god stood in his chariot, his team of hippocampi would race through the waves, their hooves creating foam and spray as they moved. When storms brewed, sailors would see these mighty beasts leading Poseidon's charge across angry waters. The ancient Greeks and Romans put images of the hippocampus on their coins, in their bathhouses, and near their fountains. Sailors often prayed to these creatures before starting long trips at sea, hoping the horsefish would keep them safe. Even when a Greek city called Helike sank beneath the waves, people said they could still see a bronze statue of Poseidon and his hippocampi in the clear waters, catching their fishing nets as if to remind them of the sea's power, sei. The Ichthyocentaur lived in the deep waters of ancient Greece and Rome. These strange beings ruled the space between sea and land, moving freely in both worlds. People respected these creatures because they could help guide lost ships to safety, or lead them into dangerous waters. These beings combined 3 different animals into one amazing form. From the waist up, they looked like humans with strong arms and shoulders. Where a human's legs would be, they had the chest and front legs of a powerful horse. Behind that, their bodies ended in a long fishtail that sparkled with scales. Some even had small crab claws growing from their heads like horns. 2 famous Ichthyocentaurs, named Bythos and Aphros, played a special role in the birth of Aphrodite, the goddess of love. As she rose from the sea foam in a giant shell, these 2 sea beings lifted her up and carried her safely to land. Bythos, whose name means deep sea, looked old and wise, while Aphros, whose name means foam, appeared young and strong. Artists across Greece and Rome put images of these creatures in their finest buildings. They covered the floors of rich homes with tiny colored tiles that showed Ichthyocentaurs swimming through blue waters. People built fountains with these beings spouting water from their mouths, and they carved their shapes into the walls of public baths, believing they brought good luck to swimmers and sailors. The great fish Ika-Roa swam through the dark waters of the night sky, creating a path of light that stretched from one end of the heavens to the other. This mighty creature, both fish and goddess, held the power to give birth to countless stars. The ancient Maori people looked up to Ika-Roa with deep respect, for she brought light and guidance to their world through her children, the stars. Her form stretched across the night sky like a gleaming silver shark, her scales made of stardust and cosmic light. From nose to tail, Ika-Roa's body created what we now call the Milky Way. Her fins sparkled with newborn stars, and her eyes shone like twin moons in the darkness. In the most famous story of Ika-Roa, she swam through the endless dark waters above the world, scattering her offspring behind her like shining scales. As she moved, each scale became a star, filling the empty sky with points of light. Her journey created the great river of stars that flows across our night sky. For the Maori people, Ika-Roa served as both a sacred guardian and a way to find their path at sea. Sailors watched her glowing form to guide their boats across the ocean at night. Farmers looked to her position in the sky to know when to plant their crops, and storytellers shared tales of her endless swim through the heavens to teach children about the patterns of the stars. In the dark wells and underground springs of Malta, the Belliegha waited for children who came too close to the water's edge. This strange creature could reach up from the depths with its tail hand to grab the young and pull them down into its watery home. Parents across Malta warned their children about this monster to keep them safe from dangerous open wells. The Belliegha looked like a giant eel with wet, shiny skin, but two features set it apart from normal water creatures. Its long tongue moved like a frog's, shooting out to taste the air above the well. At the end of its tail grew a human hand with 5 fingers that could grip as strongly as any grown man's hand. One story tells of a small boy who ignored his mother's warnings and played near an old well at sunset. As he leaned over to drop stones in the water, the Belliegha's hand shot up from below. The creature grabbed the boy's arm, but his screams brought villagers running with torches, and the monster let go and sank back into the darkness. The Belliegha shaped how Maltese families lived their daily lives. Parents built walls around wells to protect their children. They set rules about never going alone to get water. The creature's legend helped keep children away from the real dangers of deep, open wells, teaching them to be careful around water through fear of the monster that lived below. In the dark waters off western Japan, the Icenaid hunted near the shores of Matsuura, waiting for boats to pass overhead. This giant sea monster used its spiked tail to grab sailors from their ships and pull them into the depths. Local fishermen feared the Icenaid because its arrival brought fierce storms that could destroy entire fishing fleets. The Icenaid's body stayed hidden in the deep water, making it more feared than any normal shark. Only its massive tail fin broke the surface, covered in rows of sharp hooks that gleamed like metal in the sunlight. The creature's true size remained unknown, but sailors said its tail alone stood taller than the largest fishing boat. Stories tell of a calm day when the Icenaid attacked a group of fishing boats near Matsuura. Without warning, strong winds began to blow, and the monster's hooked tail rose from the waves. The tail swept across the boats, catching 3 fishermen and dragging them into the sea. None of the men were ever seen again. The Icenaid changed how people lived and worked along the coast of western Japan. Fishing crews watched for sudden storms that might signal the monster's presence. They built stronger boats with higher sides to protect themselves. When the weather turned rough, they stayed close to shore where the water was too shallow for the great beast to swim. In the cold northern waters, Jasconius swam as the largest of all sea creatures, so huge that sailors often thought it was an island. This giant fish could stay still for days at a time, letting plants grow on its vast back. Sailors both feared and respected Jasconius because it could sink their ships when it moved, yet its seeming stillness offered them a place to rest in rough seas. The creature looked like a living piece of land, with its gray-green skin matching the color of stone and earth. Trees and grass grew from the soil that collected on its wide, flat back. When Jasconius floated near the surface, only the gentlest ripples around its edges hinted that this was no true island. Saint Brendan and his monks once landed their ship on what they thought was a small island during their ocean journey. They set up camp and lit a fire to celebrate Easter, but their campfire woke Jasconius from its sleep. As the great fish began to move, the monks ran to their ship in fear, watching as their island sanctuary sank beneath the waves. Sailors changed their ways after hearing tales of Jasconius. They learned to watch for signs that an island might be alive, like water moving strangely around its edges, or birds acting nervous near its shores. Ship captains made new rules about checking unknown islands before letting their crews go ashore, knowing that what looked like safe harbor might actually be the back of the great fish. The Jengu lived in the rivers and ocean waters of Cameroon, where they served as guides between the world of humans and the spirit realm. These powerful water beings could heal the sick and bring good fortune to those who honored them. The coastal peoples of Cameroon deeply respected the Jengu, believing these spirits watched over both the natural world and the fate of all living things. These spirits looked like beautiful mermaids with long, flowing hair and distinctive gaps between their front teeth. Their beauty drew people to the water's edge, where the Jengu would appear to those they chose to help or teach. Though they lived underwater, they could move freely between their watery home and the human world above. Each year, the Jengu shared their wisdom during a great celebration called the Ngondo Festival. At this event, a specially trained priest would swim deep beneath the waters of the Wuri River, carrying gifts for the spirits. The priest stayed underwater for many minutes, speaking with the Jengu, and returned with messages about what the coming year would bring for the people. The Jengu shaped the daily lives of the coastal peoples through special groups called Jengu cults. These groups helped young women become adults through sacred ceremonies that could last almost a year. The spirits taught these women secret languages and special wisdom, marking their change from girls to grown women. Families sought the Jengu's help when normal medicine failed, believing the spirits' healing powers were stronger than any human cure. The Jialong lived in the cloud-filled mountains of ancient China. This water dragon could change the weather with a flick of its tail, bringing rain to dry farmland or storms to frighten its enemies. Unlike other Chinese dragons that lived in palaces under the sea, the Jialong chose to stay close to the sky, where it could watch over the people who prayed to it for help with their crops. The Jialong looked like a giant snake with the strong legs of a tiger and the antlers of a deer. Its scales shone like jade in the sunlight, and pearls hung from its neck that glowed in different colors to match its mood. When it flew, its whiskers streamed behind it like silk ribbons in the wind, and its claws grabbed clouds as easily as a bird catches fish. The most famous story of the Jialong tells of a time when a great drought threatened the land. The people burned incense and left gifts of fruit at mountain temples, begging for help. The Jialong heard their prayers and fought the sun itself, wrapping its long body around the burning star until rain clouds could form. It then led these clouds across China like a shepherd guiding sheep, making sure every field got the water it needed. The farmers loved the Jialong so much they painted its picture on their tools and carved its shape into stones near their wells. Parents told their children to be as kind as the Jialong, which never kept rain for itself but shared it with all who asked. Even today, some Chinese villages hold festivals when the spring rains begin, thanking the Jialong for watching over their crops. In the rivers and ponds of Japan lives a clever water spirit called the Kappa. These small but mighty beings possess strength greater than a grown man, making them feared guardians of the waterways. The Kappa's most striking feature is a water-filled bowl on top of its head, which holds the source of its power. If this water spills, the Kappa becomes weak and must return to its river home. The Kappa looks like a child-sized mixture of human and turtle, with green scaly skin and a shell on its back. Its webbed hands and feet help it swim as fast as a fish, while its turtle-like features let it hide among the reeds. The creature carries the smell of fish with it, warning people of its presence. A metal cap often covers its head bowl when it ventures onto land, protecting its precious water supply. One famous tale tells of a farmer who struck an unusual deal with a Kappa. The creature agreed to help water his fields, but asked to marry the farmer's daughter in return. The clever daughter challenged the Kappa to put several gourds under water, knowing it would need to bow down to complete this task. When the Kappa bowed, the water spilled from its head, leaving it powerless and forcing it to break the marriage agreement. Kappa shaped how Japanese people lived near water, teaching them both caution and respect. Parents used stories of Kappa to warn children about the dangers of deep water, while farmers left offerings of cucumbers, the Kappa's favorite food, to gain its help with irrigation. Some villages still post warning signs about Kappa near dangerous waters, turning an ancient belief into a modern safety tool. In return for kindness, Kappa sometimes shared valuable knowledge with humans. They taught people the art of setting broken bones, brought lucky gifts of fresh fish to friendly families, and protected children from drowning. This mix of danger and helpfulness made the Kappa one of Japan's most memorable spirits, feared by some but honored by others through shrines and festivals that continue today. In the murky waters of Lerna, an ancient Greek lagoon, lived a mighty creature known as Carcinus the giant crab. This huge beast could grip and hold down the strongest fighters with its powerful claws. The gods saw such worth in this creature that after its death, they turned it into stars in the night sky. The giant crab looked much like the crabs we know today, but it grew to an amazing size. Its hard shell measured as wide as a grown man is tall, and its claws could wrap around a warrior's leg. Some artists show it as a sea crab with a round body, while others paint it more like a river crayfish with a longer shape. The most famous tale of Carcinus tells how it fought beside the many-headed Hydra snake against the hero Heracles. The goddess Hera sent the crab to help the Hydra by pinching Heracles' feet with its strong claws, but Heracles proved too strong. He crushed the brave crab under his heel and went on to defeat the Hydra. The story of the giant crab left such a mark on Greek life that it earned a place among the stars. The goddess Hera felt so moved by the crab's loyal service that she created a new group of stars called Cancer, which we still see in the night sky today. The Greeks saw this as a sign that even a losing battle could lead to lasting glory. The knucker dragon lived in deep holes filled with water, known as knucker holes, across southern England. These fierce dragons could strike like lightning from their watery homes, snatching cattle and humans alike. Unlike their fire-breathing cousins, knuckers used speed and stealth to hunt, making them especially feared by farmers and travelers who passed near their territory. The knucker looked like a thick snake with strong, short legs and dark scales that shone like wet stones. Its head was as big as a horse's, with teeth as sharp as daggers and eyes that glowed green in the dark. When it moved through its water-filled den, only these glowing eyes showed above the surface, making it hard to spot before it attacked. The most famous knucker lived in Lyminster, England, where it terrorized the town by eating livestock and young maidens. The local king offered his daughter's hand in marriage to anyone who could kill the beast. A clever young man named Jim Puddock baked a huge pie filled with poison, which the greedy dragon ate whole. The knucker died, and Jim won his princess bride, though some say the dragon's poison killed him too. Villages near knucker holes changed their whole way of life to stay safe from these dragons. Farmers built high stone walls around their pastures, and never let children play alone near ponds or deep pools. Even today, some old roads in southern England twist and turn to avoid the ancient knucker holes where these dragons once lived. Sailors across the northern seas lived in fear of the Kraken, a giant creature that could pull whole ships into the depths. This monster from Norse tales could create whirlpools by diving deep into the ocean, trapping any boats that sailed too close. Ships vanished without warning when the Kraken hunted, leaving other sailors afraid to cross waters where it lived. The Kraken's body stretched longer than 3 Viking ships placed end to end. Its arms looked like giant tree trunks covered in suckers as big as shields, which could grab and crush wooden boats. 2 eyes the size of wagon wheels glowed in its massive head, and its beak could crack ships like nuts. One famous tale tells of a kraken that attacked a group of fishing boats near Norway. As the beast began to pull the first boat under, a quick-thinking sailor threw barrels of fish oil into the water. The oil made the surface smooth and still, which confused the kraken's senses. It lost its grip on the boat and sank back into the deep, allowing the fishermen to escape. The kraken changed how people lived at sea. Sailors started carrying barrels of fish oil to trick the beast. They drew maps showing places where the kraken lived and shared them with other ships. People also watched for signs of the creature, like fish swimming to the surface or bubbles rising from below, to avoid its hunting grounds. The Llewellyn roamed the rivers and swamps of Scotland, bringing fear to farmers and their animals. This water creature looked like a giant mouse with deadly poison covering its skin. People believed one touch from the Llewellyn could kill their cows and sheep, making it a serious threat to their way of life. The creature was no bigger than a common rat, but its rough gray fur and sharp teeth made it stand out from normal rodents. It swam through the water using a thick tail that moved like a small snake. Red eyes glowed in its pointed face, and tiny webbed feet helped it move quickly both in water and on land. A shepherd once saw a Llewellyn swimming upstream near his flock. As the creature climbed onto a rock, one of his sheep went to drink from the river. The shepherd threw his staff at the Llewellyn, making it dive back into the water, but its poison had already touched the surface. His sheep drank the tainted water and died before sunset. Farmers created special prayers and charms to keep the Llewellyn away from their lands. They placed rings of iron around their wells and water troughs to protect their animals. Some people hung dried herbs over their barn doors, as they thought certain plants could stop the creature from entering. At night, they told stories of the Llewellyn to warn children never to touch strange animals near the water. The Leviathan ruled the ancient seas around the Middle East. This massive sea monster could swallow ships whole and create huge waves just by moving its tail. Sailors and coastal people feared the Leviathan because they believed it could rise from the depths at any moment to destroy their vessels and flood their towns. The beast looked like a mix of whale, dragon, and serpent, stretching longer than 7 large ships placed end to end. Thick scales covered its body like shields of iron, making weapons useless against its skin. Steam and fire burst from its mouth and nose when it rose from the water, while its eyes glowed like the morning sun. God used the Leviathan to show a man named Job how small and weak humans were compared to the creatures of the world. When Job questioned why he faced so many hard times, God asked him if he could catch the Leviathan with a fishing hook or tie a rope around its tongue. These questions helped Job understand that some things in life were beyond human control. People changed their sailing routes and built temples near harbors to stay safe from the Leviathan. Sailors threw gifts into the sea before long trips, hoping to keep the monster calm. Many coastal towns kept watchmen on towers to warn ships and people if they spotted the creature's huge form moving under the waves. The great monster became a symbol of chaos and the untamed power of the sea. Kings and leaders used its image on their shields and flags to show their strength, while artists drew it in the corners of maps to mark dangerous waters. Even today, people use the word Leviathan to describe anything extremely large and powerful. The Loch Ness Monster lives in the cold, dark waters of Loch Ness, a large lake in Scotland. This shy beast can change shape at will and stay underwater for hours without coming up for air. People both fear and love Nessie, as they call it, because it guards the lake's depths while rarely showing itself to humans. The creature looks like a mix between a snake and a seal, with skin as dark as wet rocks and a long neck that rises like a tower from the water. Its head is small and round like a horse's, sitting atop a body as big as a house. Some say they have seen flippers moving beneath the surface, pushing the beast through the water faster than any boat. Saint Columba met the monster in the year 565 when it tried to attack one of his followers who was swimming in the lake. The saint raised his hand and spoke firmly to the beast, ordering it to go no further and do not touch the man. The monster stopped at once and swam away, showing that even this mighty creature would listen to holy commands. The monster changed how people lived around Loch Ness forever. Tourists come from all over the world to try to spot Nessie, and local shops sell monster toys and pictures. People with special cameras and boats search the lake every year, hoping to prove the creature exists. Many families in the area tell stories about times their parents or grandparents saw the monster swimming in the early morning fog. The loup carcole lived in the caves of southern France, where it used its sticky drool and long tentacles to catch prey. Local people feared this monster because it could reach into their homes and barns through tiny holes, snatching animals and even children while staying hidden underground. The beast had such a fearsome reputation that families warned their children never to play near cave openings or dark holes in the ground. This half-snake, half-octopus creature stretched longer than 3 houses placed end to end. Its round body looked like a giant snail shell, but instead of a tiny head, it had a ring of thick tentacles that could reach hundreds of feet. The beast's mouth dripped with gluey slime that stuck to anything it touched, making it impossible for victims to escape once caught. The most famous story of the loup carcole tells of a time when it emptied an entire village of its livestock in one night. The monster reached its tentacles through gaps in barn walls and under doors, pulling sheep, cows, and horses into its underground lair. When farmers tried to save their animals, they found only trails of slime leading to dark holes in the earth. French villagers changed how they built their homes because of the loup carcole. They sealed all gaps in their walls with metal and stone, blocked every crack that led underground, and kept their animals in barns built high above the ground on stone platforms. Parents taught their children special songs about staying away from caves and watching for signs of slime trails, turning their fear into lessons that helped keep their families safe. A giant octopus named Lusca haunts the deep blue holes of the Bahamas, where ocean caves drop hundreds of feet below the surface. This monster of the sea grabs boats and swimmers with its many arms, pulling them down into dark waters. Island people both fear and respect Lusca because it guards the ocean's secrets and punishes those who take too many fish. The beast looks like an octopus but grows as large as a fishing boat, with arms that stretch 50 feet long. Its dark red skin can change color to match the water or rocks around it, making it hard to spot until too late. Unlike normal octopuses, Lusca has a long shark-like tail and rows of sharp teeth behind its beak. One famous tale tells of a group of pearl divers who found a cave full of treasures from sunken ships. As they filled their bags with gold, Lusca rose up from the deep, wrapping its arms around their boat. The monster crushed their vessel and dragged most of them down, but one diver lived to warn others about being too greedy in Lusca's waters. For hundreds of years, fishermen in the Bahamas have planned their trips around Lusca's habits. They avoid certain blue holes where the creature lives, never fish alone, and share their catch with others to avoid taking too much from the sea. Parents tell their children about Lusca to teach them respect for the ocean's power and the importance of not being greedy. The Makara swam through ancient India's sacred rivers, ruling as a mighty guardian of temples and holy places. Half crocodile and half sea creature, this powerful beast could change its size at will, growing from the length of a boat to the size of a small island. Hindu gods and goddesses often chose the Makara as their protector because it moved freely between water, land, and the spirit world. The Makara's body mixed parts from many animals into one fearsome shape. Its crocodile head opened to show rows of sharp teeth, while fish scales covered its neck and back. The front legs looked like an elephant's feet, but its back half ended in a fish tail that could split the strongest waves. Peacock feathers sometimes grew along its spine, shining with all the colors of a rainbow. In the most famous Makara story, the sea god Varuna rode his faithful Makara mount to save a coastal village from evil water spirits. The Makara grew to an enormous size, creating waves that pushed back the evil spirits while keeping the village safe on dry land. Varuna blessed the Makara with the power to guard all water temples after this brave act. People carved Makara images on temple walls and gates to keep away dark forces and bring good luck. Boats often carried small Makara statues to protect sailors at sea, and women wore Makara jewelry during important ceremonies. The faithful believed that praying near a Makara statue would bring rain during dry seasons and keep floods away during storms. People still honor the Makara today by placing its image at the entrance of sacred pools and water tanks. Priests say special prayers to the Makara before blessing the water, asking it to keep the holy places pure and safe for all who come to worship. The rivers and seas of West Africa hold the powerful spirit known as Mami Wata, a water goddess who could grant wealth and healing to her followers. She appeared to people near the water's edge, offering them riches and good fortune in exchange for their loyalty. Those who saw her faced a choice: follow her rules and gain her gifts, or break their promise and face her anger. She took the form of a beautiful woman with long, dark hair that flowed like waves around her shoulders. Her lower body could change from human legs to a fishtail whenever she entered the water. Snakes often wrapped around her arms and neck like living jewelry, and she carried a golden mirror and comb that sparkled in the sunlight. One famous story tells of a fisherman who met Mami Wata on a moonlit beach. She offered to make his nets always full of fish if he would promise never to tell anyone about their meeting. The fisherman kept his word for many years, becoming the most successful fisher in his village. But one day he told his wife about Mami Wata, and all his good fortune vanished overnight. People built shrines to Mami Wata near rivers and along the coast, bringing her gifts of jewelry, perfume, and sweet foods. Traders asked for her blessing before long sea journeys, while healers called on her power to cure illnesses. Her followers wore white clothes and silver jewelry to honor her, believing these things would catch her eye and win her favor. Many still respect Mami Wata's power today, leaving coins and small mirrors near the water as gifts. Swimmers and fishers whisper prayers to her for safety, and merchants place her image in their shops to bring good business. Some say that anyone who dreams of being underwater has been visited by Mami Wata, marking them for either good fortune or a warning to remember her rules. The merlion guards the shores of Singapore, standing as a mighty guardian with the head of a lion and the body of a fish. This magical creature shoots an endless stream of water from its mouth, showing its power over the seas and storms. People believe it protects their island home and brings good luck to all who live there. The creature rises 40 feet tall, its white stone body gleaming in the sun like ocean foam. Its fish scales shimmer from its neck down to its curved tail, while its lion face shows sharp teeth and kind eyes. The merlion's mane flows like waves around its proud face, making it look both fierce and noble. Long ago, when a great storm threatened to flood Singapore, the merlion rose from the waves to save the city. It shot water high into the sky, pushing back the dark clouds and calming the angry sea. The people watched in wonder as their guardian turned nature's fury into a gentle rain, saving countless lives. The merlion changed how Singapore's people saw themselves and their connection to the sea. Fishermen began leaving small gifts of fruit and flowers at the shore, asking for safe journeys. Children grew up telling stories of the gentle giant that watched over their homes, and travelers came from far away to stand in its presence. The story of the merlion taught people to be brave like lions and adaptable like fish. Parents told their children that just as the merlion brought together two different creatures in one body, Singapore brought together many peoples and traditions to make something new and wonderful. The merfolk lived in all the world's oceans, from warm tropical waters to icy northern seas. These powerful beings could control ocean waves and speak to sea creatures. Sailors both feared and loved merfolk, who could either save ships from storms or lure them onto deadly rocks with their beautiful songs. These water beings looked human from the head to the waist, but had fishtails instead of legs. Their skin often matched the colors of the sea, from pale blue to deep green. Some had long, flowing hair that sparkled like sunlight on water, while others wore crowns of coral and shells. The most famous tale tells of a young mermaid who fell in love with a human prince. She gave up her voice to a sea witch in trade for human legs, hoping to win his heart. Each step felt like walking on sharp knives, but she danced for him anyway. When the prince married another, the mermaid's heart broke, and she turned into sea foam. Sailors kept watch for merfolk on long ocean trips, believing these beings could point the way to rich fishing spots or warn of coming storms. Ship captains made rules against killing certain fish, thinking they might be friends of the merfolk. People living near the sea left gifts of pearls and shells on the beach, hoping to win the favor of these ocean dwellers. The Mizuchi lived in Japan's deep rivers and lakes, where it ruled the waters with its power to control rain and floods. This dragon-shaped water spirit brought both fear and hope to the villages near its home. Farmers and townspeople left offerings at the water's edge, hoping the Mizuchi would protect their crops with gentle rain instead of destroying them with floods. The Mizuchi took the shape of a long, serpentine dragon with shining scales that sparkled like water in sunlight. Its head bore antlers like a deer's, and its whiskers flowed like seaweed in the current. When it moved through the water, its body curved and twisted like a river's path, and its eyes glowed with the cold blue light of the deepest waters. The most famous tale of the Mizuchi tells of its battle with a proud samurai. The warrior claimed he could defeat any creature, so he marched to the Mizuchi's river and challenged it to fight. The Mizuchi rose from the waters, towering above the trees, and with one breath created a whirlpool that taught the samurai the true meaning of nature's strength. The people who lived near Mizuchi waters shaped their whole lives around the spirit's moods. Fishermen watched the water's color to know when the Mizuchi was angry, and farmers built special shrines near their rice fields to please it. Children learned songs about the Mizuchi that taught them to respect the power of water, and these songs still echo in Japanese villages today. In the deep forests and rivers of the Congo Basin, stories tell of a creature called Mokelembembe, which means one who stops the flow of rivers. This giant beast lived in river caves and ate only plants, yet locals feared it would attack and destroy any boat that came too close. The tales of this creature spread from village to village across Central Africa, where people still speak of its power over the waters. The Mokelembembe looked much like the largest animals anyone had ever seen. People who claimed to see it said it stood as tall as an elephant, with smooth gray-brown skin and a neck that stretched longer than a giraffe's. It had one long tooth or horn, and its strong tail moved like a crocodile's tail in the water. The creature left deep paths through the jungle as it searched for its favorite food, white flowering vines that grew near the water. German Captain von Stein learned of the Mokelembembe in 1913 when he walked the paths of what is now Cameroon. Local guides showed him fresh trails near the Sambo River, where they said the creature had just passed by looking for food. Though many large animals had left tracks in the mud, von Stein found the stories interesting, because different groups of people told him the same details about the beast. The Mokelembembe shaped how people lived along the rivers. Boat crews stayed away from sharp river bends where they believed the creature made its home in underwater caves. Hunters and gatherers watched for signs of the beast before collecting plants near the water. Even today, some villages tell stories of the Mokelembembe to warn children about the dangers that can hide in rivers and swamps. The Morgor lived in the waters around Cornwall, England, where it hunted both fish and humans. This massive sea monster could stretch longer than 2 fishing boats and had the power to sink ships with one strike of its tail. Local fishermen feared the beast because it would attack their boats and drag sailors into the depths. The creature looked like a giant snake with rough, dark skin and a head like a seal. It had a long neck that rose 20 feet above the waves, showing rows of sharp horns along its back. Small eyes glowed green in the dark, and witnesses said it made sounds like a crying woman. In the spring of 1976, dozens of people saw the Morgar attack a small fishing boat near Falmouth Bay. The monster wrapped its body around the boat and crushed it into pieces. 2 fishermen jumped into a life raft, but one was pulled under by a long, whip-like tail. The other man lived to tell the tale. People living on the coast changed their fishing habits because of the Morgar. They stopped fishing at night and began working in groups of 3 or more boats. Locals also built higher walls along the shore to block the view of the sea, believing that meeting the creature's gaze would bring bad luck to their families. Morvarker roamed the shores of Brittany, France, as a magical horse with the power to run on water. This seahorse could carry riders across waves as easily as land, never sinking beneath the surface. Kings and heroes sought Morvarkiv because only the pure of heart could ride him. The mighty horse stood taller than any normal steed, with a coat that shifted colors like the sea. His mane flowed like ocean waves, sometimes blue, sometimes green. When he galloped, his hooves sparked with light that looked like stars falling on water. The most famous story tells of King Gradlon, who rode Morvark to save his daughter from a flooding city. As waves chased them, the horse ran on top of the water toward safety. But the horse stopped and refused to move until the king pushed his evil daughter into the sea. Only then did Morvarks carry Gradlon to dry land. People living along the coast watched for Morvarks during storms, believing his appearance meant someone needed saving. Parents told children that if they lived good lives, they might one day see the great horse running on waves in the moonlight. Sailors carved his image on their ships for luck at sea. The Muckshilch lurked in the cold seas around Scotland, where it used its mighty strength to sink boats and drag sailors into the depths. Local people both feared and respected this beast because it could control the waters in its territory, making the difference between a safe journey and certain death. Its roar could be heard for miles across the water, warning ships to stay away from its hunting grounds. The creature looked like a mix between a whale and a giant seal, with dark green skin that shimmered like wet stones. Its head bore 7 fins shaped like seaweed, and its eyes glowed yellow in the murky water. The Muk-shilch could stretch its neck to be as long as 2 fishing boats, and its tail could split into 3 parts when it hunted. One famous tale tells of a fisherman named Ian, who tried to catch the Muk-shilch in his nets. The beast allowed itself to be caught, then pulled Ian's boat in circles for 3 days and nights. On the 3rd night, it led the boat to a hidden cave filled with pearls and gold from sunken ships. Ian took only 1 pearl, and from that day on, the Muk-shilch protected his fishing routes. The Scottish people built special shrines along the coast to keep the Muk-shilch happy. Fishermen would leave gifts of fresh fish and sweet cakes before long voyages. Those who showed respect to the creature often found schools of fish near their boats, while those who ignored the old ways sometimes vanished at sea. The belief in the Muk-shilch's power grew so strong that even today, some old fishing boats carry its symbol for luck. The Muljawonk lived in the deep waters of the Murray River in South Australia. This fierce water spirit could grab people from boats and drag them down to drown in the murky depths. Aboriginal parents warned their children about the Muljawonk to keep them away from dangerous parts of the river, where strong currents and hidden snags could pull swimmers under. The spirit took different shapes, but most often looked like a tall man with dark green skin and long, stringy hair covered in river weeds. Its fingers stretched out like the roots of water plants, perfect for grabbing unlucky victims. Sharp teeth filled its wide mouth, and its eyes glowed like yellow moons in the darkness beneath the water's surface. One famous story tells of a group of fishermen who laughed at warnings about the Muljawonk. As they pulled in their nets full of fish, a huge green hand shot up from the water and grabbed their boat. The men fought with their oars, but the spirit pulled harder until the boat tipped over. Only 1 man made it back to shore to tell the tale. The Muljawonk shaped how Aboriginal people lived along the Murray River for thousands of years. Families taught their children to fish only in safe, shallow waters during daylight. At night, people stayed away from the riverbanks and kept their fires burning bright to ward off the spirit. These rules helped keep communities safe from the real dangers that lurked in Australia's longest river. Naiads lived in the fresh waters of ancient Greece, where they ruled over rivers, streams, and springs. These water spirits could heal the sick with their magic waters, or curse those who made them angry. People feared their power to drown swimmers, but also prayed to them for clean water and good health. A naiad looked like a beautiful young woman with long, flowing hair the color of river weeds. Her skin shimmered like sunlight on water, and her eyes changed color with her moods, blue when happy, gray when stormy. She wore robes that seemed made of flowing water and could melt into her stream like a ripple on the surface. The most famous story tells of a naiad named Arethusa who caught the eye of a river god. When he chased her, she begged the goddess Artemis for help. Artemis turned her into a spring of pure water that flowed from Greece all the way under the sea to the island of Sicily, where she bubbles up to this day. Greeks built shrines near springs and streams to honor the naiads who lived there. Young women left gifts of flowers and honey before their weddings to ask for blessings. Travelers always stopped to make small offerings before drinking from a spring, knowing that a naiad's favor could mean the difference between life and death on a long journey. The giant catfish Namazu lived deep beneath the islands of Japan, held down by a powerful god named Kashima. This enormous creature had the power to create earthquakes whenever it thrashed or moved its massive tail. People both feared and prayed to Namazu because they believed it controlled the fate of their land and homes. The beast stretched longer than 40 fishing boats placed end to end, with whiskers as thick as tree trunks and scales that shone like metal in the dark. Its eyes glowed red like hot coals, and its mouth could swallow a house whole. When it moved, its body rippled like waves across the ocean floor. One famous story tells how Namazu broke free when Kashima fell asleep at his post. The giant fish shook the earth so hard that cities crumbled and the sea rose up to flood the land. Fires broke out across Japan, and people ran in terror as their world turned to chaos. Only when Kashima woke up and rushed to pin Namazu down with his sword did the destruction end. The Japanese people watched for signs that might warn them when Namazu would strike again. They hung special pictures of the catfish in their homes to protect against earthquakes. Some even thanked Namazu after earthquakes, because they believed the destruction led to equal wealth among people, as everyone had to rebuild together. During the times when earthquakes shook the land, people said Kashima had grown weak or tired, letting Namazu move too freely. They built shrines to honor Kashima and prayed for him to stay strong and alert, keeping the great catfish still and the ground stable beneath their feet. Off the sunny coasts of ancient Greece, the Nereids danced through ocean waves as guardians of sailors and fishermen. These 50 sisters held power over the waters, calming storms and guiding ships safely to shore. People living near the sea left them small gifts of food and wine, hoping to earn their protection before long journeys across dangerous waters. The Nereids looked like beautiful young women with long, flowing hair that shimmered like sunlight on water. Their lower bodies could shift between human legs and fishtails, letting them swim faster than dolphins. They wore robes made from sea foam that sparkled like tiny pearls, and crowns of coral and shells marked them as daughters of the sea god Nereus. Among the sisters, Thetis proved herself the bravest when she helped Zeus keep his throne. Other gods had planned to chain Zeus, but Thetis learned of their plot. She quickly brought Briareus, a giant with 100 arms, to stand guard over Zeus. This action saved the king of gods, and earned Thetis great honor among both gods and humans. The Nereids shaped how people lived near the sea in ancient times. Fishermen painted their images on boats and sang songs asking for good catches. Mothers with sons on trading ships burned sweet herbs at shrines to the Nereids, asking them to calm rough waters. Sailors who survived shipwrecks often said they saw these sea maidens pushing them toward shore, or keeping them afloat until help arrived. In ancient Japan's warm seas, the Ningyo brought both wonder and fear to fishing villages along the coast. This mysterious creature possessed the power to grant eternal youth to anyone who ate its flesh, making it a target for brave and foolish hunters alike. Local people believed catching or killing a Ningyo would bring terrible storms and misfortune to their entire community. The Ningyo appeared as a strange mix of human and fish, much like the mermaids of Western tales, but with key differences. Its face looked like that of a monkey, with small sharp teeth and golden eyes that glowed in dark waters. The creature's body stretched to about the size of a young child, with scales that shimmered like pearls and delicate fins where human arms would be. One famous tale tells of a prince who secretly bought Ningyo flesh from a fisherman and served it at a feast. His guests grew younger by the day, their gray hair turning black and their wrinkles smoothing away. But soon after, massive waves destroyed the prince's coastal palace, and violent storms sank his entire fleet of ships. The fear of Ningyo's curse shaped how Japanese fishing villages lived for hundreds of years. Fishermen made special charms to keep the creature away from their nets, while others left small offerings of rice at the shoreline to earn its favor. Even today, some older fishing boats in Japan carry marks meant to ward off the Ningyo's anger, showing how deeply this story touched people's lives. The Nuckelavee brought terror to the Orkney Islands, a group of islands off the northern coast of Scotland. This sea monster could walk on land and had the power to spread disease to farm crops and animals with its foul breath. People feared this creature most of all the spirits in Scottish tales because it showed no mercy to anyone who crossed its path. The Nuckelavee looked like a horse and rider fused into one horrible form. Its legs were like black fins, and its head was 10 times larger than a normal horse's head, with a single red eye that burned like fire. The rider had no skin, showing raw red muscle and black blood flowing through clear veins, while long arms reached almost to the ground. The most famous story tells of a blacksmith named Tammy who met the Nuckelavee on a stormy night. The creature chased him for miles along the coast, but Tammy knew the beast's weakness. It could not cross fresh water. He ran across a stream just as the monster's long arms were about to grab him, and watched as the angry creature had to turn back toward the sea. Island folk changed their whole way of life to avoid the Nuckelavee. They never went out alone on stormy nights and always built their homes near streams or rivers for safety. Farmers burned seaweed on their fields, as they believed its smoke drove the monster away, and everyone said special prayers before walking along the coast after dark. Near the shores and rivers of ancient Greece, the Oceanids watched over every drop of fresh water on earth. These gentle water spirits blessed crops with morning dew and guided springs up from deep underground. People honored them with gifts and songs because the Oceanids could either bless the land with pure, healing waters or curse it with drought. Each Oceanid looked like a beautiful young woman made of flowing water and light. Their hair moved like waves even when no wind blew, and their eyes shimmered with all the colors of a clear stream in sunlight. When they walked, their feet barely touched the ground, leaving small pools of water that turned into springs. The story of the Oceanid Métis shows their great power and wisdom. Zeus himself sought her help during the great war against the Titans, older gods who ruled before him. Métis gave Zeus a special herb that made the Titan leader Cronus sick, forcing him to free Zeus's brothers and sisters whom he had swallowed. Greek farmers built small shrines near springs and streams to honor the Oceanids. They left offerings of honey and fresh bread to keep the water flowing clean and sweet. Women came to these shrines to ask for healthy children, and sailors prayed to the Oceanids for safe journeys, believing these spirits could calm rough waters. Even the greatest gods showed respect to these water spirits. The Oceanids served as judges at divine contests, healers for injured gods, and teachers of wisdom to young heroes. Their power to create and find fresh water made them some of the most important spirits in the ancient world. The waters of Lake Okanagan in Canada hide the Ogopogo, a giant snake-like creature that rules its depths. This water beast stretches longer than 3 school buses and can swim faster than any boat on the lake. Local tribes respected and feared the Ogopogo, calling it Naha-a-Itk, which means the sacred creature of the water. The Ogopogo looks like a huge snake with dark green or black skin that helps it blend into the lake's waters. Its head resembles that of a sheep or goat, with large eyes that witness say glow in murky water. The creature moves through water by making big loops with its body, creating waves that can rock even large boats. The most famous sighting happened when 30 people watched the Ogopogo chase boats near Rattlesnake Island. The creature swam after several small boats, making huge waves that nearly capsized them. People on shore took photos and filmed videos of something large moving through the water, though the pictures came out blurry. Lake Okanagan's people changed how they used the lake because of Ogopogo. Native tribes would pray and leave gifts before crossing certain parts of the water. Even today, some boat captains avoid areas where people often see the creature. Tourist boats now offer special trips to look for Ogopogo, making it as famous as Scotland's Loch Ness Monster. The Ondine lived in rivers and lakes across Europe, where she used her beautiful singing to draw men into the water. She stood out from other water spirits because she could gain a human soul by marrying a mortal man. People both yearned for and feared Ondines because these spirits could bring true love or death by drowning. Her shape changed between 2 forms: a lovely young woman with flowing hair the color of water, and a creature with fins and scales that gleamed like pearls. In human form, she kept one mark of her water nature. Her feet stayed wet no matter how long she walked on land. When she swam, her movements looked as smooth as flowing silk. The most famous Ondine fell in love with a knight named Lawrence, who swore to her that his every waking breath would be faithful to her alone. They married, and she gained a human soul, but she later found him sleeping in another woman's arms. She cursed him so that if he ever fell asleep, he would stop breathing. Lawrence fought sleep as long as he could, but finally dozed off and died. The story of Ondine changed how people viewed promises of eternal love. Young couples used her tale as a warning about making oaths they could not keep. Fishermen left small gifts at riverside shrines to win her blessing before going out in their boats. Artists painted her as a symbol of nature's power to give both life and death through water. The Ponaturi haunted the rocky shores and sea caves of New Zealand, where they emerged at night to hunt humans. These sea spirits held power over the tides and could breathe both in water and on land. Local tribes feared the Ponaturi because they stole children and dragged sailors into the depths. These beings looked like small people with blue-tinted skin and long, sharp fingers like fishhooks. Their eyes glowed red in the dark, and seaweed-like hair floated around their heads even when dry. The Ponaturi wore cloaks made from sealskin that helped them glide through water as fast as sharks. A brave woman named Kai saved her people from the Ponaturi by tricking them into staying in a meeting house until sunrise. The Ponaturi could not survive in sunlight, which turned them to stone. She blocked all the holes in the roof and walls, then held them inside with songs and stories until the sun rose and killed them all. Coastal villages changed their way of life because of the Ponaturi. Families built homes away from the shore and taught children never to swim alone. Fishermen worked only in daylight hours and carried special stones blessed by tribal elders to ward off the sea spirits. At night, people lit fires along the beach to keep the Ponaturi in their caves. The Kalupalik hunts near the icy shores of the Arctic, where Inuit communities have lived for thousands of years. This powerful sea woman uses her long, sharp fingernails and hypnotic humming to catch children who walk too close to the water's edge. Parents warn their children about the Kalupalik to keep them safe from falling through thin ice or being swept away by strong currents. The creature looks much like a human woman from the waist up, with green-tinted skin and long, dark hair that flows like seaweed in the water. Below her waist, her body becomes seal-like, with a strong tail made for swimming through cold waters. She wears a large cloth bag called an amauti on her back, the same kind Inuit mothers use to carry their babies. One famous story tells of a young boy who ignored his grandmother's warnings and played near the shore during a storm. The Kalupalik rose from the waves, humming her strange song, and tried to put him in her amauti. The boy remembered his grandmother's teachings and threw sharp pieces of ice at the creature's face, giving him just enough time to run back to his village. The Kalupalik shaped how Inuit families raised their children and helped them understand the dangers of their Arctic home. Children learn to listen to their elders, stay away from unstable ice, and respect the power of the sea. Even today, many Inuit parents share stories of the Kalupalik to teach their children about safety in the harsh Arctic environment. The Ranamari terrorized the people of the Maldives, rising from the sea each month to demand a young woman as payment. This giant sea demon threatened to flood the islands and destroy homes if the people failed to give their offering. The rulers of the Maldives feared the creature so much that they built a special temple where they left young women to meet their fate. The monster stood as tall as 3 palm trees and had the head of a fish with rows of sharp teeth. Its body mixed features of sharks, eels, and humans, with scales that glowed like blue fire in the dark. The creature's eyes shone red like burning coral, and its voice boomed like thunder across the waves. A brave young woman named Khadija chose to face the Ranamari. Instead of waiting in fear, she spent the night in the temple reading from the Holy Quran. When the demon rose from the waves at midnight, her prayers drove it back into the sea. The creature howled in pain and promised never to return to the islands. The defeat of Ranamari changed life in the Maldives forever. The people stopped fearing the monthly rise of the full moon and no longer had to sacrifice their daughters. This victory helped spread Islam throughout the islands as people saw how faith could overcome even the strongest evil. The old temple where Khadija faced the demon became a mosque, a place for prayer instead of fear. In the rivers and lakes of Eastern Europe, the Rusalka lured young men to their deaths with her beautiful singing. This water spirit looked like a young woman with long, wet hair, and could make herself seem both lovely and lonely to those who passed by. People both feared and felt sorry for the Rusalka, as they believed she was once a normal girl who had drowned, often because of a broken heart or cruel treatment. The Rusalka appeared as a pale-skinned maiden with flowing hair that seemed to ripple like water, even when there was no wind. Her eyes shone like moonlight on a lake, and water drops always fell from her hair and clothes. She looked like any normal girl from far away, but those who came close could see that her skin had a blue-green tint, like the surface of a deep pond. One famous tale tells of a young fisherman who heard sweet singing late at night and saw a beautiful girl sitting by the river, combing her long hair. When he came closer, she held out her hand and asked him to join her in a dance. The fisherman could not resist her sad smile and took her hand, but as soon as they began to dance, she pulled him into the deep water, never to be seen again. The rusalka shaped how people lived near lakes and rivers. Parents warned their children never to go near the water alone, especially at night or during Rusalka week, a time in early summer when these spirits were said to leave the water and swing on tree branches. Young men took extra care during this time, often wearing protective herbs that were meant to keep the rusalka away. During spring and summer, people left small gifts like ribbons and flowers on tree branches near the water to keep the rusalka happy. They believed that if they showed kindness to these spirits, the rusalka might protect them from drowning instead of causing harm. Some even said that if you could make a rusalka laugh with joy instead of sadness, she would grant you the gift of great happiness. In the rivers of Ireland lived a magical fish known as the salmon of wisdom. This special creature held all the knowledge of the world within its body. People sought this fish because eating it would make someone the smartest person alive. The salmon gained its wisdom by eating nuts that fell from 9 sacred hazel trees into a well. The salmon of wisdom looked like a normal fish on the outside, but its scales shone with all the colors of a rainbow. It grew larger than any other salmon, reaching the size of a small boat. Its eyes glowed with a golden light that seemed to pierce through anyone who looked at them. A man named Fionn served as a helper to a wise poet who spent 7 years trying to catch the salmon. When they finally caught it, the poet told young Fionn to cook the fish, but not to eat any of it. While cooking, Fionn burned his thumb on the hot fish and put it in his mouth to stop the pain. This small taste gave Fionn all the salmon's wisdom. The story of the salmon of wisdom changed how Irish people viewed both knowledge and fate. They learned that wisdom could come to anyone, not just those who sought it on purpose. Parents told their children this tale to teach them that learning could happen at any time and in surprising ways. The Irish also began to see salmon as special fish that carried magic in their scales. Among the dark waters off Japan's coast lived the samabito, a shark-faced being whose tears turned into precious gems. This strange creature came from the Dragon Palace, an underwater kingdom ruled by the Dragon King. People both feared the samabito's fierce look and wanted its valuable tears, which could make someone rich in moments. The samabito had the body of a human, but the head of a shark, with skin as black as ink. Sharp teeth filled its mouth, and its eyes glowed like red fire in the dark. It stood as tall as 2 men and wore clothes made from seaweed and shells that dripped with ocean water. A samurai named Totaro met a weeping samabito on a bridge one rainy night. The creature told Totaro it had been thrown out of the Dragon Palace and had nowhere to live. Taking pity on the samabito, Totaro let it stay in his garden pond. When Totaro later needed money to marry his love, the kind samabito cried enough tears to fill a bowl with precious gems. Japanese people began to see that even scary-looking beings could have gentle hearts after hearing the samabito's story. They taught their children not to judge others by how they looked. Sailors left small gifts near the shore for any samabito who might need help, hoping the creature would return their kindness with its valuable tears. The sea griffin ruled the cold waters around Norway during the Viking Age. This powerful beast combined the hunting skills of an eagle with the swimming strength of a seal, making it one of the most feared hunters in the northern seas. Sailors believed the sea griffin could smell gold and silver from miles away, which made merchant ships its favorite target. Unlike its cousin, the griffin that lived on land, the sea griffin had dark blue scales instead of feathers, and flippers rather than lion paws. Its head looked like an eagle's, complete with a sharp, hooked beak that could tear through wooden ship hulls. The creature's long neck rose from a seal-like body, and its tail ended in a fan of spikes that could stun fish and small whales. The most famous story of the sea griffin tells of its battle with Thor, the Norse god of thunder. When Thor went fishing for the world serpent, a sea griffin tried to steal his golden belt. The fight lasted 3 days and 3 nights, with waves crashing so high they flooded nearby villages. In the end, Thor won by tricking the beast into biting a rock covered in gold leaf. Norse sailors painted the sea griffin's image on their ships, believing this would keep other sea griffins away. They also started the practice of hiding their gold and silver deep inside their ships, rather than in deck chests. Some fishing communities left small offerings of shiny objects on the beach each month, hoping the sea griffin would leave their boats alone. Strange and wise sea lions lived along the rocky shores of ancient Greece, where they served Poseidon as guards of his underwater palaces. These magical creatures could speak human languages and sang songs that told the future. Sailors both feared and sought out sea lions, hoping to learn their fortunes while also staying safe from their sharp teeth and powerful magic. The sea lions looked nothing like the animals we call sea lions today. They had the head of a lion with a thick mane made of seaweed and shells, the front legs of a lion, and the tail of a fish covered in golden scales. Their eyes glowed like green fire under the waves, and their voices sounded like a mix of lion roars and whale songs. The most famous tale tells of a sea lion who saved a drowning prince by telling him how to find a magic pearl. The prince had fallen from his ship during a storm, and the sea lion offered to help if the prince could answer 3 riddles. When the prince solved all 3, the sea lion gave him a pearl that let him breathe underwater and led him safely to shore. Greek sailors started leaving gifts of honey cakes near seaside caves where sea lions lived. They believed eating sweet food made sea lions more likely to share good fortunes rather than bad ones. Some coastal towns built special platforms near the water where people could sit and ask sea lions for advice about fishing, weather, and love. The sea monk haunted the cold waters between Denmark and England during the Middle Ages. This strange creature looked like a mix between a human monk and a fish, which made sailors think it came from heaven or hell. People feared the sea monk because it would rise from the waves to judge their sins, but they also hoped it might bless their ships with safe travel. From its waist up, the sea monk had the shape of a bald human head and chest covered in scales that looked like a monk's brown robe. Below the waist, it had a fishtail with fins that shone like polished copper in the sun. Its face looked old and wise, with deep-set eyes that glowed in the dark, but its mouth was wide and full of sharp teeth like a shark. The most famous story of the sea monk comes from a Dutch fishing boat in the year 1200. The crew caught the creature in their nets, and it began to make signs of blessing with its webbed hands. The captain freed it from the nets, and soon after, the boat found the richest catch of fish in the town's history. Fishing towns along the North Sea began to leave small crosses floating in the water to attract the sea monk's blessing. Ships started carrying extra fish to throw back as gifts if they saw the creature. Some churches even put pictures of the sea monk in their windows, showing it blessing boats or punishing bad sailors who worked on holy days. The sea serpent ruled the northern waters between Norway and Iceland. This giant snake-like creature could rise taller than the masts of Viking ships and crush boats with its powerful coils. Sailors both hated and respected the beast, as it guarded rich fishing grounds and could either block or guide ships to safe harbor. In the cold waters, its dark green scales shone like wet stones, and its head looked much like a horse's butt with sharp teeth and a long forked tongue. The sea serpent moved through waves like a massive water snake, stretching longer than 5 ships placed end to end. Its eyes glowed yellow in the dark, helping sailors spot it in time to change course. The most famous tale of the sea serpent comes from a group of fishermen near the coast of Denmark. They followed a school of herring into a deep fjord, where the serpent rose from the depths and herded even more fish toward their nets. The creature let them take half the catch, but warned them with a loud hiss when they grew too greedy. The sea serpent shaped how Norse people lived and worked on the water. Boat builders made their ships stronger to survive its crushing coils, while fishermen created special nets that could be cut loose if the beast appeared. Some coastal towns even left offerings of fish on the shore, hoping to keep the serpent happy and their ships safe. The Selma made its home in the cold waters near Norway's shores, stretching longer than 2 fishing boats placed end to end. This massive sea serpent could move faster than any ship of its time, racing through waves with frightening speed. Local fishermen both feared and respected the Selma, as it could either guide them to rich fishing grounds or overturn their boats with a single twist of its body. The creature's head looked much like a horse's, but with large eyes that glowed like green lanterns in the dark waters. Its long neck rose from the sea like a snake, while the rest of its body stayed hidden beneath the waves. The Selma's skin shined like wet metal in the sunlight, covered in scales that changed color from deep blue to stormy gray. One famous tale tells of a Selma that saved an entire fishing village from starving during a harsh winter. The serpent herded thousands of fish into the village's bay, creating such a large catch that the people had enough food to last until spring. The strange part of the story came when villagers left offerings of silver coins on the shore. The next morning, they found fresh fish in place of every coin. The Selma shaped how Norwegian coastal people lived their lives for hundreds of years. Sailors watched for its special signs, a double wave or a flash of scales, to know when storms approached. Parents told their children never to throw trash into the sea, warning that the Selma would push it back onto their beaches. Some fishing families even painted the serpent's shape on their boats for good luck, believing it would help them find better fishing spots. The Shachihoko guarded the roofs of Japanese castles, watching from high above with its fierce tiger head and fish body. This magical creature could control rain, bringing water when crops needed it, or stopping floods that threatened the town. People believed the Shachihoko protected buildings from fire, which made it one of the most important guardians in old Japan. Half tiger and half fish, the Shachihoko stood taller than two men when placed on castle roofs. Its sharp tiger teeth gleamed in the sun, while its fish scales shined like gold coins. The creature always faced the sky with its mouth open wide, ready to catch rain or shoot water from its throat. Two long whiskers flowed from its face like ribbons in the wind. The most famous Shachihoko story comes from Nagoya Castle, where two golden Shachihoko sat on the highest roof. One summer, a great fire spread through the town, burning everything in its path. As flames reached the castle, both Shachihoko sprang to life, spraying water from their mouths until the fire died out. The castle still stands today because of their protection. Japanese builders placed Shachihoko on important buildings throughout history, turning them into symbols of safety and good luck. Farmers watched these creatures on castle roofs to know when rain would come for their rice fields. Even today, people make small Shachihoko statues for their homes, keeping the old belief that these beings will protect them from fire and flood. The Shellycoat haunted the rivers and streams of Scotland, hiding under bridges and near watermills. This water spirit loved to play tricks on travelers, using its magic to make sounds that led people the wrong way. Local people learned to listen for the noise of shells clicking together, a sure sign that the Shellycoat waited nearby to cause mischief. Looking like a small man covered in shells and seaweed, the Shellycoat stood no taller than a child. Its coat made rattling sounds as it moved, like pebbles shaking in a jar. The creature's eyes glowed like pale moons in the dark, and its fingers ended in sharp points that could grab onto rocks and wood. Looking like a small man covered in shells and seaweed, the Shellycoat stood no taller than a child. Its coat made rattling sounds as it moved, like pebbles shaking in a jar. The creature's eyes glowed like pale moons in the dark, and its fingers ended in sharp points that could grab onto rocks and wood. Farmers and millers left small gifts of food near their watermills to keep the Shellycoat happy. Parents warned children to stay away from bridges at night, though they also said that hearing shell rattles meant the next day would bring good fortune. Mill workers claimed their grain ground better when they heard the spirit's laughter echo across the water. In the warm waters around New Zealand, the Taniwa made its home as a guardian of sacred places and protector of local tribes. This mighty water spirit could change its shape at will, most often appearing as a giant lizard or fierce water creature. The Maori people both feared and honored the Taniwa, as it punished those who broke sacred laws, but also guided and protected those who showed proper respect. The Taniwa took many forms, but its most common shape was that of a huge reptile, like a lizard mixed with a crocodile. Its dark scales gleamed in the sunlight when it rose from the depths, and some say it had eyes that glowed like green fire. The creature could stretch as long as a whale, with rows of sharp spines along its back and a powerful tail that could stir up massive waves. One famous story tells of a taniwa named Urea, who lived in the Hauraki Gulf near Auckland. Urea formed a close bond with a local chief's daughter and became her guardian spirit. When enemy warriors tried to attack her tribe by sea, Urea created a great storm that sank the invasion fleet, saving his human friend and her people. The taniwa shaped how Maori tribes lived, traveled, and built their homes. People would ask permission before crossing waters where a taniwa lived, and they built their villages away from its known paths. Fishing boats would leave small gifts for the taniwa to ensure safe passage, and parents taught their children to respect the waters it guarded. The Tijeruk haunted the icy waters near Alaska, where Inuit sailors feared its long, snake-like form beneath the waves. This massive sea creature could stretch longer than 3 fishing boats placed end to end, and had the power to grab people from docks and beaches with its flexible neck. Local tribes respected and feared the Tijeruk so much they warned their children never to play near the water's edge at dusk, when it hunted most often. The beast looked like a mix between a seal and a giant snake, with smooth dark skin that blended with deep waters. Its head bore sharp teeth like a wolf's, while its neck could bend and twist like seaweed in a current. 2 pairs of strong flippers helped it chase boats and swim faster than any normal sea animal, making escape nearly impossible once it gave chase. Many stories tell of a brave hunter who met the Tijeruk during a storm at sea. His small boat hit ice in the dark, and the creature rose from the waves like a living mountain. Instead of eating the hunter, the beast pushed his boat to shore with its nose. From that day on, the hunter left gifts of seal meat on the beach for the Tijeruk, and his family never lost another boat to the ice. The Tijeruk shaped how coastal villages lived their daily lives. Fishers painted special marks on their boats to ask for safe passage through its waters. Parents used its story to teach children about the sea's dangers, while hunters learned to watch for signs of its coming, like unusual waves or sudden quiet. Some people today still say they see strange shapes in Alaska's waters, wondering if the Tijeruk still swims in the deep. The sea goddess Toyotama Hime lived in a grand palace under the waves of Japan. As daughter of the dragon god of the sea, she held the power to change her shape at will and control the tides that fishers depended on for their catch. Sailors prayed to her for safe trips across the water, while coastal towns built shrines to win her favor and protect their homes from storms. In her true form, she glowed like moonlight on water, with long flowing hair the color of sea foam and scales that shimmered like pearls. Her robes moved like gentle waves, never getting wet, and her voice rang soft and clear like shells chiming in the wind. When angry, her eyes flashed like lightning over stormy seas, and her teeth sharpened like those of the sharks that served her. The most famous story tells of how she fell in love with a human prince named Huri, who lost his fishing hook in her father's kingdom. She helped him find the hook and married him, following him to live on land, but she made him promise never to watch her give birth to their child. When he broke this promise, he saw her turn into her true dragon form as she gave birth, and she fled back to the sea forever, leaving their baby behind. Her story taught Japanese people about keeping promises and respecting the power of the sea. Women about to give birth still ask for her blessing, while fishers leave small gifts at her shrines before heading out to sea. Many coastal families claim they come from her bloodline, and some say they can spot her palace's golden roof deep under the waves on clear, quiet days. Among the waves of ancient Greek seas lived the Tritons, powerful children of the sea god Poseidon. These water spirits could calm storms or whip them into fury by blowing their magic shell trumpets, which made sounds like rolling thunder across the water. Sailors both feared and honored the Tritons, leaving them gifts of wine and honey to earn safe passage through dangerous waters. Half human and half fish, these beings had the strong upper bodies and faces of men with long green beards that dripped seawater like rain. From the waist down, they had fishtails covered in silver scales that caught sunlight like mirrors on the waves. Each Triton carried a spiral shell trumpet bigger than a man's arm, and some held 3-pointed spears called tridents, just like their father Poseidon. The most famous story tells of a Triton who saved the Argonauts, brave sailors searching for a magical golden fleece. Their ship became trapped in a vast desert when a great wave washed them far from the sea. A kind Triton appeared and carried their ship on his shoulders, walking for 9 days through hot sands until he reached the waves and set them safely back on their journey. Greek sailors painted pictures of Tritons on their ships and carved them into harbor walls for luck at sea. People living on the coast listened for the sound of shell trumpets before big storms and taught their children to leave small gifts on the beach during the first full moon of spring. Fishers claimed that seeing a Triton meant they would find waters rich with fish, while others said hearing their trumpets meant storms would soon pass. The Umibozu stalked Japanese waters, rising from the deep like a tower of black water. This giant sea spirit showed itself to lonely ships on calm nights, when the ocean lay flat as glass. Sailors both feared and respected the Umibozu, because it could sink ships with giant waves or bring good luck to those who treated it well. The creature looked like a huge black monk with smooth, wet skin that shone in the moonlight. Its round head had no face except for 2 eyes that glowed like stars on a dark night. When it rose from the sea, the Umibozu grew taller than the ship's mast, and its arms stretched wider than fishing nets. One famous tale tells of a captain who met the Umibozu on a quiet night. The spirit asked the captain for a barrel to use as a toy. When the captain gave his last water barrel, the Umibozu played with it like a child's ball, then filled it with fresh fish to feed the hungry crew. But another ship that refused to share met giant waves that broke their boat into pieces. Japanese fishing villages built small shrines near their ports to honor the Umibozu. Sailors left gifts of barrels, sake, and rice before long trips, hoping the spirit would protect them at sea. Many coastal towns still tell children to be kind and sharing, just as the good captain was to the Umibozu. The Vodyanoi ruled the waters of Eastern Europe, making his home in deep river pools and lakes. This water spirit held power over drowning, choosing who would sink or swim in his waters. Farmers and fishermen left small gifts like butter and bread near the water's edge, because they believed the Vodyanoi could flood their lands or tear their nets if they made him angry. The Vodyanoi looked like an old man covered in green algae and mud, with webbed fingers and a long, dripping beard. His eyes glowed red like coals in the dark, and his wet skin gleamed like a frog's. Though small, about the size of a child, the Vodyanoi had the strength of 10 men and could pull even the strongest swimmer under the waves. A miller once ignored the warnings about building too close to the Vodyanoi's favorite pool. One night, as the miller worked late, he heard strange singing from the water. The Vodyanoi offered to help turn the mill wheel at night, but when the greedy miller agreed, the spirit worked the wheel so fast it broke apart. The rushing water destroyed the mill and dragged the miller into the depths. People changed their ways near water after hearing tales of the Vodyanoi. Swimmers avoided deep pools, especially at night when the Vodyanoi grew stronger. Mills and fishing boats carried small bells whose ringing was said to keep the water spirit away. Parents taught their children to throw a handful of salt into the water before fishing or swimming, as the Vodyanoi hated the taste of salt. Native American tribes of the Great Basin found water babies near rivers and lakes in Nevada and California. These small water spirits could cry like human infants to lure people close to dangerous waters. The tribes feared water babies because they dragged unwary adults to their death, but also respected them as powerful guardians of sacred water places. A water baby stood no taller than a human hand, with soft gray skin that glistened like a fish. Its large black eyes shone in the dark, and tiny sharp teeth filled its mouth. Though it looked somewhat like a human baby, it had webbed fingers and toes, and its head was shaped like that of a tadpole. The most famous story tells of a hunter who heard a baby crying near Walker Lake. He followed the sound to help what he thought was a lost child. When he reached the water's edge, small hands grabbed his feet and pulled him under. Other hunters found only his footprints leading into the lake, with tiny wet handprints in the sand beside them. Tribes taught their children never to go near the water alone, especially at night when water babies were most active. Parents wrapped special herbs in leather pouches for their children to wear around their necks to keep water babies away. Medicine people, tribal healers who knew the old ways, placed offering bowls of pine nuts and rabbit meat near the water to keep the spirits calm. The water bull haunted the deep lochs of Scotland, rising from dark waters to hunt people who walked alone at night. Unlike regular bulls, this creature could breathe underwater and change its size at will, making it a terror both in water and on land. The Highland people feared this beast because it could drag victims down to underwater caves, never to be seen again. The water bull looked much like a normal black bull, but its coat dripped endless streams of water that never dried. Its eyes glowed with an eerie blue light that people could see from far away. When it walked on land, its hooves left small pools of water that stayed fresh and never soaked into the ground. One famous tale tells of a young shepherd who met the water bull near Loch Ness. The bull appeared small at first, no bigger than a calf, but grew to the size of a house when the shepherd tried to catch it. The shepherd ran away, but the water bull chased him all the way home, shrinking back to normal size before diving into a small stream that led back to the loch. People living near Scottish lochs changed their whole way of life because of the water bull. They never walked alone near water at night, and shepherds kept their animals away from loch shores at dusk and dawn. Parents taught their children to listen for the sound of dripping water on dry days, which meant the water bull was near. The water bull taught the Highland people to respect the power of their lochs and streams. Boats would not go out if anyone spotted the bull's glowing eyes, and families built their homes far from the water's edge. Even today, some Scottish people say they hear the heavy splashing of the water bull on quiet nights, though few claim to have seen it. The water dragon ruled the rivers and lakes of ancient China, bringing rain to farmlands and storms to sailors who failed to show respect. Unlike its fire-breathing cousins in the west, this mighty beast controlled the flow of water in all its forms, from gentle streams to crushing waves. The Chinese people both feared and honored the water dragon, as it held the power to create rich harvests or deadly floods. This serpentine creature stretched as long as 12 boats placed end to end, with scales that shimmered like moonlight on water. Its 4 clawed feet helped it walk on land, though it spent most of its time swimming through clouds and seas. The dragon's whiskers sensed coming storms, while its giant eyes glowed like golden lanterns in the dark. The most famous story tells of a water dragon who saved a small fishing village from a terrible drought. When the people began to starve, they placed their last fish as an offering by the river. The dragon rose from the depths, touched by their gift, and brought 3 days of soft rain that saved their crops and filled their wells. The water dragon shaped how people lived near rivers and seas in ancient China. Fishermen painted its image on their boats for safe journeys, while farmers built shrines near their fields to ask for rain. Parents told their children to be quiet during storms, saying that loud noises might anger the dragon and bring floods instead of gentle showers. The water horse haunted the lakes and rivers of Scotland, taking the shape of a beautiful black horse to lure humans close to the water's edge. This clever beast used magic to stick its victims to its back before diving deep into the cold waters to drown them. Scottish parents warned their children never to pet strange horses near the water, fearing the water horse would take them. From a distance, the water horse looked like a perfect riding horse with a coat that gleamed like wet silk in the moonlight. Its mane flowed like seaweed in the wind, and its eyes held an eerie green glow that some said looked like algae in deep water. When it opened its mouth to whinny, people could see rows of sharp teeth like those of a pikefish. The tale of young Angus MacLaren shows why people feared this beast. One night, Angus found what he thought was a lost horse near Loch Ness. When he tried to lead it home, his hands stuck fast to its mane. The horse ran for the water, but Angus pulled out his knife and cut off the piece of mane he held, breaking free just before the water horse plunged into the loch. Villages near lakes and rivers made strict rules about water safety because of the water horse. Children wore tiny bells that would ring if they went too close to the water's edge. Families kept iron crosses near their doors, as people believed iron could drive the beast away. Even today, some Scottish grandparents tell their grandchildren to stay away from strange horses near the water. Among the rivers and streams of Wales lived a strange creature called the water leper, which jumped from bank to bank using its giant bat-like wings. This odd beast made itself known by its loud shriek and its habit of eating fish whole from fishermen's lines. Local people feared the water leper because it would attack their boats and steal their catch, leaving them with empty nets and damaged craft. The water leper looked like a mix between a large frog and a bat, with webbed back legs as strong as a kangaroo's. Its wings spread wider than a man's arms, letting it glide over the water's surface. The creature had no front legs, but its mouth held rows of needle-sharp teeth that could bite through fishing line and wood alike. One famous story tells of a fisherman named Owen who tried to catch the water leper itself. He baited a huge hook with a whole salmon and waited through the night. The water leper took the bait but proved too strong, pulling Owen's boat upstream for miles until the line snapped, leaving Owen far from home with a broken rod and a new respect for the beast's power. Welsh fishing villages changed their ways because of the water leper. Fishermen learned to string bells on their lines to scare it away, and they never fished alone in case the creature attacked their boat. They also started using stronger fishing line made from braided horsehair, which the water leper's teeth couldn't cut as easily. The water sprite dwelled in rivers, ponds, and quiet pools across Europe, where it protected the plants and animals living in its waters. These small but mighty spirits could make water flow faster or slower at will, helping or harming boats that passed through their domain. Local people left small gifts of food and flowers to earn the sprite's favor and ensure safe passage across its waters. A water sprite stood no taller than a child's hand, with skin that shone like moonlight on water and hair made of flowing green water weeds. Its wings looked like drops of morning dew stretched into the shape of dragonfly wings, catching light and splitting it into rainbow colors. The sprite wore clothes made from flower petals and spider silk, which never got wet no matter how deep it swam. One old story tells of a poor fisher who caught no fish for many days and feared his family would starve. The water sprite heard his worried prayers and led a school of fish into his nets. When the fisher tried to catch every single fish, the sprite became angry at his greed and tangled his nets. The fisher learned to take only what he needed, and from then on, the sprite helped him find just enough fish each day. The presence of water sprites changed how people treated rivers and streams in their daily lives. Washerwomen spoke softly near the water and never used harsh soaps that might harm the sprite's underwater garden. Boaters watched for small whirlpools that showed where sprites danced, steering clear to avoid being pulled into their spiraling play. Children learned to thank the sprites after swimming, leaving behind a pretty stone or fresh flower as payment for using their waters. The Yakaruna lived in the deep rivers and lakes of the Amazon rainforest, where they ruled over fish and water plants. These water spirits could breathe both in water and on land, making them powerful beings in South American folklore. The native people of the Amazon both feared and respected Yakaruna because they could pull humans down into their underwater cities and turn them into water creatures. The Yakaruna looked like humans from the waist up, but had the lower body of a fish, much like the merfolk of European tales. Their heads turned backward on their shoulders, letting them see behind themselves at all times. They had bright green eyes that glowed in the dark waters, and their skin showed the colors of fish scales in sunlight. One famous story tells of a young woman who fell in love with a Yakaruna prince. He took her to his crystal palace under the river, where she lived as his queen for many years. When she finally returned to visit her family, she found she could no longer eat human food or breathe normal air. She had to return to the underwater world forever. The Amazon peoples changed many of their fishing habits because of the Yakaruna. They would not fish at noon or midnight, the times when Yakaruna were said to be most active. Families taught their children to stay away from deep pools and rivers, and fishermen made special offerings before casting their nets. Even today, some local people leave small gifts at the water's edge to keep the peace with these river spirits. From the dark waters of Arabic and Jewish tales comes the Zaratan, a sea creature so huge that sailors mistook it for an island. This giant turtle had the power to sink whole ships by diving down after crews set up camp on its shell. Sailors both feared and watched for the Zaratan because one wrong stop could mean death for an entire crew. The Zaratan's shell stretched as wide as the length of 20 large ships placed end to end. Sand and soil collected on its back, letting small plants grow there over time. Birds would rest on its surface, and sometimes trees would take root, making the creature look just like a peaceful island in the middle of the sea. The most famous story tells of a group of sailors who found what looked like a perfect island for rest. They dropped anchor, built fires, and set up their camp. As the men slept, smoke from their fires made the Zaratan sneeze. The great beast dove beneath the waves, pulling all the sailors and their boats down into the deep. Sailors changed their ways after hearing tales of the Zaratan. They learned to watch for signs that an island might be alive, like feeling the ground shake or seeing the water bubble nearby. Ship captains made maps marking safe islands and taught new sailors to drop a rock near any unknown island first. If the rock made the water ripple too much, they would sail away fast.